And welcome back to a new episode of the Women's Strength Society show. Today with the topic insulin resistance and what you need to know about your blood sugar. And we were just watching a reel on Instagram that kind of sparked the idea for this episode, because I think insulin and insulin resistance is definitely all over social media, especially when it comes to health and fitness for women. And there's just a lot of talk and a lot of content that makes you scared. Scared of insulin, scared of blood sugar going up and down and the blood sugar roller coaster, and that being the reason why you cannot achieve X, Y, and Z.
Scared of eating red apples.
Exactly. So in this reel, it was even shown that you should only eat green apples because they spike your blood sugar, but then it's coming down faster again, or stuff like that. So you should only eat green apples. No, you should not eat the green apples. You should eat the red apples. And I remember a time where I was so confused with nutrition and what to eat, how much to eat, and when to eat. And seeing that type of content was just adding more and more rules to the big rule book that I already had when it comes to food. And it was so frustrating because then I would pay attention to that kind of stuff, thinking that it would move the needle in some direction to drop body fat and get in shape and build muscle and all that stuff.
But it did not, right?
But it did definitely not. So I was definitely not focusing on the right things and not being able, because I didn't have the knowledge back then, to cut out the fluff and see through, what type of content just tries to scare me or sell me on something. Because the same person who was talking about the apples was also selling a blood glucose monitor that you can use. So, of course, he's making content about how these apples are making a huge difference, to show you just like, hey, get my affiliate link to get your own glucose monitor.
Yeah, and I mean, purely in terms of content, it's also quite interesting to see that, like, it's pretty fun to watch, right? It's like, hey, I eat that food and then I eat that food. What's the difference? Then, of course, you want to know. And I remember seeing a few of those reels with, the difference between chocolates, like dark chocolate or milk chocolate, or between different fruits and that sort of things. And it's just like kind of fun to watch because you are expecting that something's going to be different.
It's a little experiment, yeah.
It feels like you are learning something because like, I saw that. I saw it coming. I knew that
milk chocolate is
more bad, but also sometimes you have surprises. And so I remember when I was doing that with talking about apples, with my blood glucose monitor, I remember seeing like for the exact same amount of carbs and like pretty much the same macros, I remember that my blood sugar would be more stable if I was eating some ice cream from Häagen-Dazs than the apple. And then I was like, I knew it! I need to be eating the ice cream diet.
The ice cream diet.
And so sometimes, there are some outcomes that are pretty unexpected.
I think we should open up a new Instagram account.
And the ice cream
diet,
the
ice cream diet,
the
and
pizza
then
and ice cream diet.
And then showing the CGM, the constant glucose monitoring, and how Häagen-Dazs is this is no advertisement for Häagen-Dazs, but how Häagen-Dazs is keeping your blood sugar levels stable.
Eat Häagen-Dazs.
But it's so interesting because when you're
get 20% free with the link in bio.
On your bulk order.
Then we could do like the comparison between the different taste. So I'm pretty sure that I would fare the best with salted caramel,
Of course.
right? And
It's your
then
favorite.
second would definitely be, I think, praline and creams or macadamia nut brittle. And then way down on the list, I think the worst for me would be
Vanilla chocolate.
no, vanilla is okay, but I was going to say like Belgian chocolate,
Yeah.
something like that, because I'm not like a huge fan of it.
So boring.
I'm pretty sure that that's the feedback that I would get from my blood sugar. It would tell me like, skip the chocolate, stick to caramel.
And I mean, we both used CGM monitors in the past just to. We were curious about the stuff, also because, of course, we work with clients who are also interested in that. So we always want to lead in some form or shape and understand better how blood sugar is influenced by different things. And we definitely had big differences. I mean, you were responding to certain foods like not at all. I remember, for example, the Haagen-Dazs was pretty like smooth on your blood sugar. Then eating oats was like your blood sugar was going like through the roof and crazy, and oh my gosh, what's happening here?
And I was going to say like oats were the worst, and it was always kind of surprising because what you hear constantly is like, hey, have some fiber with your carbs because it's going to slow down absorption. And I mean, oats are definitely pretty high in fiber, and it did absolutely jack shit for my blood sugar. And it was literally one of the worst quote unquote worst food that I could eat for my blood sugar. So it's not as straightforward, as simple as a lot of people make it to be.
And we're not saying oats are bad, okay?
Yeah.
Just to make this clear, you're also eating oats. It's not like a staple in your diet. You're not eating it every day.
Yeah.
But you're also not like completely excluding it because you're scared it will like spike your blood sugar.
No, but I don't really feel super well on them.
Yeah.
But it's not about like blood sugar fluctuations. It's more about the digestion. It just feels like a brick is sitting in my gut, and I don't enjoy that.
And so sometimes, when people talk you into like, this is good and this is bad, this is a good food, this is a bad food, but you kind of have the feeling like, I don't really agree with it. Something is going on.
Or the opposite, right?
Or the opposite.
Some people tell you like avoid added sugar, and then you eat an ice cream and you feel phenomenal. Then
just go for it. Just go for it.
But anyways, just to give you a bit more context about that, one of the reasons why we did those experiments, or at least I did that, was also because when I was doing my certification as a personal trainer, back then it was the beginning of low carb being like, it was still pretty niche, but it was definitely very present in the fitness world. And this is where a lot of athletes were testing that, and carbs were just seen as this non-essential thing that is going to make you tired and slows you down and create inflammation and that sort of things, and prevent you from losing body fat. And I did that for a while. I did not get really the result that I was expecting, or there was something that were kind of not really clicking, or I would be like, I'm confused why carbs would do this, but then when I eat them, then I feel the opposite way. One of those things was my digestion. And I remember like people saying, yeah, it's not good because you are going to get bloated and blah, 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 blah. But then I would do a low carb streak, and after a while I would eat some carbs, and then my digestion would be very blissful and swift. And I was like, something's not adding up.
Yeah.
And so if I experience like one exception, then there's something that's just not really correct about the mechanism behind it. And I was interested, and for me it was also a way to kind of deconstruct some of the things that I had learned, that I had heard, and that I was very, very convinced about. So it was more about that than trying to really micromanage every bite to have like a perfectly stable blood sugar, which is something that I did, and we are going to talk about that because it was fairly interesting, or at least I think it was interesting. But it was more about that than trying to to make sure that any bite would keep my blood sugar stable. And one last thing before we go on with the conversation is you also have to keep in mind, this is something that I did not realize at the time, but that I saw online recently, is that there's only a limited amount of those continuous glucose monitors. It's not like you can just go to the supermarket and buy tens of those. And those are actually pretty not only useful, but like necessary for people who rely on that to measure their blood sugar, because they actually need to do that, i.e. people who have diabetes. And so you want to keep, like, it's very fun to experiment with that, but also keep in mind that the production of those devices should focus mostly, or like 99% at least, for the people who actually need that, and not just for like the biohacking wellness experiment, until it's not like to the point where we have such an abundance of that people can just like go on and buy those. You should keep that in your mind, and that should also play a role into the decision making about like whether you are going to use one of those or not. Okay, Amen. So I'm just going to keep on reading. I was expecting a reaction from you, but you let.
No, I just said like amen.
Amen. Okay, so let's just start with that experiment that I did with the CGM, where I tried to maintain an absolutely flat blood glucose curve over the day. And so this time it was not like the pizza and ice cream diet. It was not the ice cream diet either. It was the lentil diet.
Yeah, I
right.
remember.
So I was eating lentil. So that was my main carb source. Yeah. Pretty much for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, with vegetables and protein. And the calories were somewhat like equated and stable all throughout, and I did that for 2 weeks, and I would have like a very, 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 very stable blood sugar, because for some reason this is what happens when I eat lentils. But I noticed that the first thing that I noticed was that it would still go up throughout the day. Mm-hmm. And this is something I could not understand why this was happening. And I was like, this is almost as if something in my body is pushing my blood sugar to go up, despite
like it wants
me
to go
eating
up.
like the perfect meals and perfect food to maintain my blood sugar. And I would start, I don't recall the numbers, but I would start like within range, and then at the end of the day it was at the higher end of the normal range. So it was not absolutely not like problematic in the sense of I should be afraid because this is going into red zone, uncontrolled blood sugar or something like that. But the trend was very clear. It was just like going up, and it was going up every single day, but every single day it was lower. So this comes actually from the fact that you have like a circadian rhythm, and that your blood sugar control is going to be influenced by that, meaning that you're more insulin sensitive in the morning and a bit less so in the evening.
But Yannick, I thought the body doesn't know what time it is when you eat.
Turns out it does.
That's something we hear like all the time, you know. That's the argument when we're talking about meal timing specifically and why it makes such a big difference. And others are like, no, it's only calories in, calories out. And then the other group is like, no, it's only like macros. And then there comes maybe also the group of like, no, it's only the micronutrients. And then there is the little group that says everything is important, including your meal timing.
Yeah. Not the majority. But anyway, so I was noticing that. I found that very interesting and curious, but also what was very interesting and curious was that nothing happened with my body weight. It was very, very stable, and nothing happened with my body composition. Like there was absolutely no visible change. And so when you think about inflammation that's going to drive like body fat increase or just looking watery and that sort of things. If you make some changes to your diet or to your workouts or to your sleep, then you can see that in the matters of a few days. And maybe you've experienced this when you go on holidays and after a period of stress or just like intense work, and you just feel like super tired and a bit puffy, and I think you know what I'm talking about. And then you go on holiday and after 3 days you wake up and your face like just looks different, like you're 5 years younger again, because you could just rest. And if that kind of change happens because you made change to your diet, then it's going to happen pretty quickly. But if nothing has changed within 2 weeks, then it means that this was not the culprit or the thing that was driving the inflammation or the body fat increase, or it was not preventing the reduction in inflammation or body fat increase. And so for me, I was like, this is very interesting. It means that whole talk about inflammation and insulin being the master fat storage hormone, which it is, to be absolutely fair, but there's more to it than that. And it's not possible to just say like, because you eat carbs, your blood sugar goes up and then insulin goes up and then you store fat and you get fat. It's just like not how it works. So that was the first thing that I noticed that was pretty interesting, and that really helped me debunk, like, at least for me, it was like, okay, this is not like eating carbs that are going to have an impact on your blood sugar is not the thing that's going to determine the outcome of your fat loss phase or fat loss journey, fat loss goals.
And I think like the talk around insulin in the context of women's health and fitness is in most cases, like when I'm opening up Instagram, related to inflammation and fat loss. So that's like the thing. And then you are on your fat loss journey and it's not working as you would like it to work. The fat is maybe not coming off as quickly, and there are a million different reasons why that can be the case. But you're landing on that one reel that is telling you to, eat the green apples and not the red ones, or vice versa. I don't know. I think it was the other way around. Whatever.
Avoid the red.
And then you start to believe like, oh yeah, maybe it's that, right? Maybe that's the missing piece. Maybe it's my insulin. Maybe I have insulin resistance. Maybe that's what's holding me back. And I remember that I had the same thought because back then in 2018, 2017 or something like that, I can't remember even, I was diagnosed with PCOS. And then, of course, I was starting to research a little bit more about PCOS and what it means and what other things are connected to that. And insulin resistance was coming up. And I was like, oh, yeah, well, of course, that's the reason, that's the reason I was not able to get in shape, to lose body fat, to keep the body fat off if, like, once I lost a little bit of it, I was always gaining it back. And I had the feeling I found the solution, right? I found the answer. Like, this is the label I'm going to wear, and I have PCOS, and now I have insulin resistance. But at the same time, there was something inside of me, and it's definitely a trait that I carry throughout my whole life, I think, is that I don't like to accept a label on me. And being just...
The only label you accept is cool.
Cool. I'm cool.
So if you did not know, Dragana is cool.
My label is cool. Yeah, it says everything. When you're just like, okay, but that's off topic. That's another podcast episode I need to make. No, but I was not, I could not accept that this is now my destiny. And this is like, okay, now I have this health issue. I have insulin resistance, and I will not be able to lose the body fat and get in shape, which was my absolute dream, right? to gain my period back, have my health back, and then also look freaking hot in a bikini.
Yeah.
I wanted to have both. And so I didn't stop to like keep searching. Gladly, I met you because you definitely helped me to like cut through a lot of bullshit, right?
But also that's not how it started, right? Like when we started working together, I was still like very much into that lower carb kind of thinking paradigm, and so
we were riding that wave.
That's also like what I kind of prescribed to you at the beginning. It was like, hey, cut out the carbs, don't eat carb for breakfast, because it's going to spike up your blood sugar.
Yep.
Then insulin is going to be high. You are going to have a crash later on during the day, and you are going to store the rest of the meals that you are eating.
Yeah, 10 years later, like the opposite is the truth.
Yeah. And so, and for me, it was interesting because at that period I was already kind of I was hearing all of that talk. I was kind of being brainwashed about like not eating the carbs, but at the same time I wanted to understand metabolism, because I was convinced that my metabolism was pretty slow, but I was also not exactly sure what metabolism means. And so I started to learn more about that. And one thing that I learned was, the impact of, or the function of thyroid on your metabolic rate, and also like the impact of carbohydrate and insulin on thyroid function. And there were definitely some things that did not make any sense to me. I was like, how is it that if you eat low carb, then T3 is going to go down? So let me rewind. We're
going down the rabbit hole.
Your thyroid is producing hormones, and 80% of that is not active. It's T4, and then this has to be converted into T3. That's the active form of thyroid hormone, and that's the one that's going to tell your cells that they are going to increase metabolic rate, they are going to increase fat and carb burning, they are going to help like maintain your temperature. And I was like, how is it that eating a low carb diet is good if a certain amount of carbohydrate and insulin is going to support T3 function? It did not make any sense to me. And I was like, and so did not make a lot of it. But then we started working together, and you went on that low carb diet, but then nothing happened. And then not only that, but but I was expecting the weight to go down, but then your weight would go up. And so
I looked so puffy and fluffy. My gosh.
Yeah, it was.
I reached my highest weight.
Yeah. So let's just say it was not really like a success. And then, of course, I had to question the validity of all of those claims about like low carb being superior and insulin like driving fat loss, because how is someone gaining fat if they're not eating carbs and insulin is kept low? So did not make any sense. But anyways, so what happens then when you were a CGM, continuous glucose monitor? Can you remember that?
Not too much, because I basically saw that everything is working out perfectly fine. There was no big red flags. I think, yes, when I was eating, I don't know, highly processed foods, like a ton of sweets. I don't even remember if I did that, but maybe as a little experiment. Then I would go up pretty high. But overall, I was rarely in any danger zone. Sometimes I would have drops in my blood sugar levels at night. So this is something that we definitely saw. So I had to change a little bit my dinner and make it a little bit lighter and not so heavy on carbs and have them more in
Just
the
like not
in
so
the-
late and not so big overall.
not so big. Yeah, exactly. But yeah.
But there was something that was interesting to see is that the reaction to the carb intake was fairly stable.
Yeah.
And so typically if you have like insulin resistance, what happened is the blood glucose would go up potentially higher than what's considered normal, and then it would remain up for a longer time, right? Because insulin is not acting on the cells to pull the glucose inside the cell, and so the glucose remain in your blood instead of going where it's supposed to. And this is something that did not happen, for example, for you. And so it was like there's when you just look at the curve of what's happening, actually it's a pretty normal response. So it doesn't seem to be like there's underlying insulin resistance, that you are carb intolerant, that your body doesn't know what to do with the carbs. And so it means that there's something else going on when it comes to driving body composition changes.
Yeah, and so I think for me realizing that and seeing that, and I mean, it's not like super easy when you are wearing a CGM to set up the experiment to have really reliable readings, right? If you're not taking the time to think a little bit about like, hey, how do I want to structure this experiment over like 14 days, then just like wearing it, you will not see a lot of connection between other stuff. We will go into that in a second, but it's not only the food that you eat that will have an impact on your blood sugar levels. There are also other things that will impact your blood sugar levels. So you kind of need to put a little bit more thought into your day-to-day tracking, like what you're doing, when you're doing what you're eating, the combination of foods that you're eating, like all those things. But when I saw that, actually, I'm pretty good at tolerating carbs, then I was like,
Bring it on.
Bring it on. Yeah, it was the opposite of what was told me before, that I should cut out the carbs. And so I started more and more to be somewhat confident, to embrace having carbs. And I remember then working with another coach who put me again on a low carb diet after we worked together. And the same thing happened, right? My weight started to creep up. And at some point, I remember you also telling me like, hey, just do what you feel is best for you. And I was like, fuck
and what you've seen has worked.
Yeah, I was like, fuck it, I will eat the carbs again. And I was telling that like personal trainer that I started eating carbs again, and this is how my body responded. I dropped body fat and I feel way better. And she was like, oh yeah, that's so interesting. Maybe we should do a green week, which is like eating only green vegetables for the whole week. And I was like, how can this be your conclusion to put me then again on a almost no carb diet for a whole week? It just doesn't make sense. And so end of the story is I realized through going through all of those things, having someone telling me you have PCOS, therefore you probably have insulin resistance, or at least you cannot tolerate carbs that well, to then trying low carb, to then figuring out, actually carbs do agree with me pretty well, and I should have them regularly, every day, across the day.
Can you remember if you actually ever was if you ever tested your fasted insulin levels?
I think I did when this whole PCOS thing came out, because then I was forwarded to another doctor. Then I also had the glucose testing, where I had to drink the because I was then like, oh, maybe I have insulin resistance. So I was also pushing for let me get that. Let me get that checked, because I definitely want to know if this is the thing that's holding me back from getting in shape. I think yes, but I can't remember the exact numbers that came out. But with the glucose test, you know, the ones that also pregnant women are doing, everything was fine, and there was no sign of, hey, there is something off there.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, you know, this is something what you just said about it's difficult to standardize your experiments. This is one of the main danger there is with using a CGM to control like blood sugar spike and that sort of thing. Is first you have to know that a CGM is not measuring insulin levels, so you cannot just equate insulin level with your blood sugar and just draw a conclusion of that based on that. And then the other thing is, it's also not it's interesting because we talk about blood glucose, but it's actually not really measuring that inside your blood. The needle is not going into your blood. It's, I don't recall exactly what's the name is, interstitial fluids maybe, but there are some variations, so it's not exactly the level that you have in your blood, and it's accurate enough, but also it's not like the gospel, right? It's not like the perfect accuracy, and should not be used to make diagnosis. But other than that, what's more difficult or problematic is that it is extremely difficult to do 2 weeks where you have like a very, very standardized way where you're going to test things in and out to see how this is impacting your blood sugar. You are going to have a ton of confounding variables, meaning that things that are going to influence what happens with your blood glucose that are not necessarily related to the food that you are eating.
And also, if you're doing that, you need to make sure that if you want to, you know, you see something in your blood sugar reading, whatever, and then the next day you probably want to test out if this is this one thing that you think is the reason why that happened. And so you would need to make sure that everything else remains exactly the same as the previous day, and that you're just changing that one component to test if it's true or not.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's very, very hard to do. It's not easy to do.
Yeah, I think the best way to do that would be first do 2 weeks where you just have a baseline, and then you'd have to do another 2 weeks where you're going to introduce something else, for example, because to give you some example, what's going to influence the blood sugar levels are going to be your activity level, huge one. So the amount of step that you are doing every day is going to impact that, but also your training, and it can be strength training, but it can also be cardio. So if you do a very hard interval session, then it's definitely going to have an impact.
And it's not only if you have done it that day or not, it's also what time of the day have you done it, right? If you're training or getting like 7,000 steps in the early morning, and on another day it's like you're barely moving in the morning, you're getting your steps in the evening, that as well has an impact on your blood sugar, right? Because it's a different setup.
The amount of sleep that you are getting is also going to have an influence. The amount of stress that you experience is going to have an influence. So, you know, you could be eating the exact same meal, but one is on a Sunday at noon after you've slept in and you had like a very chilled morning, and the other one is the same thing, but on Tuesday, and you just went home from work and there was a lot of traffic and someone almost hit you with their car and then insulted you or whatever, and you come home, you're super stressed. The exact same meal is not going to give you the same reading twice, because your metabolic state is going to be different because of your circumstance and environment is different. So this is something that you have to keep in mind, and it is extremely hard to replicate those tests with the foods that you are eating. And going back very quickly to the strength training, we know that it can take up to 72 hours. So it's like 3 days for glycogen reserve to be replenished. So it's, if you do a hard session with a fair amount of volume, or even if you do like something that's very metabolic, where you do a lot of reps, or you do some drop sets or myo reps, that kind of funky stuff, then it is going to impact how much glucose your muscles are going to need over the course of the next 3 days, maybe even more. And so this is going to definitely impact your blood sugar. And this is something that you have to keep in mind, because otherwise what can happen is very quickly you could label some foods as very bad and some food as very good, and then you justify eating
the ice cream
and you justify not eating the oats, but objectively speaking, like, oats are more nutritious than an ice cream, like, fact. And we don't like to say that certain foods are bad, but there's also like some context and when it's going to be absolutely fine to eat ice cream, and also a quantity, and whether that makes more sense to eat that versus eating the oats. And in most case scenario, then eating the oats is going to be a better choice.
All of this to say that you should not be scared of certain foods because you are scared of insulin and your blood sugar spiking, because as we just broke down, there are so many different things impacting your blood sugar levels that it can be super easy to say the green apple is the reason why my blood sugar is going bananas. And then you stop eating green apples, although you love them and although they actually are completely fine. And then you're sticking only to other foods. But maybe we can round this up and end this episode today with the stuff that does impact insulin resistance more than the food.
Do you want to go?
Go ahead.
Yeah, the first one is going to be activity level. And so this is something that's actually pretty amazing, because it has been researched and it has been proven that walking after a meal is something that can help you manage or lower blood glucose almost as much as metformin, which is a drug that is given to people who need to manage their blood glucose. And so this is something that is free and that you can do pretty much anytime, anywhere. And before you come at
the
me
walking,
and say,
not
like,
the metformin.
Yeah, the walking. Before you come at me and say, like, hey, but I cannot really go outside and I have to work or whatever, I'm just like,
Find a way.
I was able to do 10,000 steps in my apartment that's only like 60 square meter during the lockdown, and it was very easy to get 10,000 steps per day. And sure, like, everything was closed, so it was the only thing that I could do, but it is still possible even though you don't have a lot of space. So you can absolutely do that. If you are concerned about your blood sugar levels and you want to do something that has a positive impact on it, walk after your meal, period. Do that for 15 to 20 minutes, full stop, do it.
Get it done.
Get it done.
And yeah, being in general, more active.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a couch potato, yeah, you cannot tolerate a lot of food in general, a lot of calories, but also not a lot of carbs, because carbs are here to support your activity. So if you're getting only 4,000 steps in, like my dad yesterday, he was looking it up and he was like, 3,500 steps. And I was like, yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, get your ass moving.
Get your ass moving.
Yeah, 100%. And steps are great. You can do them anywhere, anytime. It's free. But obviously, like, strength training and cardio are super helpful as well. Low intensity cardio is going to be there to reduce inflammation, to also improve fat oxidation, which is great because this is also going to improve insulin sensitivity. And then the high intensity cardio is going to help kind of empty the tank so that your body is hungry for carbs, and this is going to help you tolerate them better when you eat them afterwards. So be active. Don't be a couch potato. This is like the first line of defense, and this is also probably the most effective one. And then the second one that is also important is improving body composition. And cannot talk today, sorry. Improving body composition. The first and easiest thing that you can do is to reduce body fat. And the way you do that is by tracking your food intake and eating in the way that's going to help you consistently lose weight over time. And it's not, you don't like lose weight by focusing on the blood sugar spikes. You lose weight by focusing on the intake that you have. Overall intake is what's going to have the biggest impact on your weight evolution over time. Full stop, period. I actually looked that up recently. I was trying to find like one study where the caloric intake was confirmed and controlled, and where eating in a calorie deficit did not produce weight loss, and it was impossible to find one. So keep in mind that when people are literally locked up in a metabolic ward where they can measure the amount of energy that they are burning, like the number of calories that they are burning, and they are given meals every day that put them in a calorie deficit, i.e. they eat less than what they burn, and everything is super tightly controlled in an experiment that you cannot do at home, then not one single study has seen that it's not possible for people not to lose weight.
No starvation mode.
No starvation. And I'm not saying that the solution is just to push lower and lower and lower and lower calories and higher and higher and higher and higher activity level. You need to find that sweet spot. And this is where things get kind of gray and a bit muddy. But also keep in mind that it works.
It works. But we also understand that it can be a little bit tricky. But that's, again, a topic for another day, because there are a lot of different things that also will influence energy in and energy out, right? And we can definitely play around with those things. I just mentioned them at the very beginning. We have the calorie in, calorie out, the macros, the micros, right? So the food quality, but then also the meal timing. So all those different layers of nutrition that will make or break your results. So if you are only focused on like one thing and it's not working, you're not able to lose body fat, and it definitely makes sense to look into the other things. So often inside the Strong Babes Club, women would come to us and they were like already doing quite a lot of work, right? If it's like eating healthy, eating clean, eating high protein, cutting the carbs, doing some fasting, like different kind of diets, but also calorie and macro tracking, and they were still hitting a roadblock on the way, then the goal for us as coaches is always to find that little like the one thing, the one piece of the puzzle that was missing, and really just check the layers and see like, oh, what are the things that we can actually improve to see if this is going to move the needle forward. That's the work that we do. If you need support with fat loss and figuring out what your nutrition gaps are, then definitely check out the Strong Babes Club.
That's it for me for today.
Until next time, bye-bye.